Hi, I'm Chelsea,
Hi, I'm Alexis.
and we're gonna talk about Zim. Alright, Invader Zim Episode 1, and Nightmare Begins, go.
You're gonna love how right off of the bat we see how wasteful the Irkens are with their space. I mean, I guess as convention goers, now we understand that having an entire planet for your conventions, maybe that'll give you room for some panels.
Welcome to Conventia, you will never leave.
Fuck, I bet there's some people who do never leave.
Oh yeah, all the slave races they have to work and clean.
Naturally.
But yeah, I was gonna say, I was counting, the first 40 seconds, I believe, they had no words other than written ones to show credits, and they also had not really that many visual going on other than establishing this is a sci-fi show.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear right away. There's spaceships, and I think that this idea is like the fact that there's a convention hall planet. While I do agree the Irkens are obviously wasteful and it's silly that they would have a fucking convention planet, but first of all, that's a pretty subtle joke to have as your first lines of your show is to say, "Welcome to Conventia, the convention planet," and then they do a little bit of sort of setting stuff to say, "You can dock your spaceship," and it's just to sound sciencey, you know.
And remember where you parked, as though the transporters could send you to the wrong ship. I don't have stand cards or something.
Of course not. That's not I'm talking about as a kid's show. This one goes for almost a full minute, being pretty subtle, and, even to the point of not having much words, and definitely not having much action.
It feels like the opening to a film. It really does.
Oh, definitely. It's directed that way. And I was gonna say that, what we establish here, that they need a full convention planet to have these things. I was gonna say that it seems silly that they would, but at the same time, considering how much they do of delegating and kind of taking their whole race into a meeting and then going you do this, you do this, you do this, that's a really weird structure. But if we're to assume that's how Irkens just are, that's really interesting, because they would have a very unified view and goal, because they would all have to come whenever they're having these big meetings, so they all know what everyone's doing all the time. They're not a we are the symbiote sort of race at all, but that's almost a similar kind of action to that.
I would say this isn't everybody. These are the soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
This is the militia. Because they say brave Irken soldiers. So we don't have civilians.
Are there civilians in their society?
I bet there are. Remember, Irkens are so... military is what they're good at, so it could be just about everybody. But they also have, weaponry and research divisions. That's in the cut episode, The Trial. But that's what Zim was originally assigned to, because they're you're really good at destroying stuff. Let's try to make him destroy stuff at other people. But he couldn't be curbed.
Yeah, okay, so there is research and development, though I did see that a lot of their other tasks seem to be done by slave races, like their shipping out items to invaders and stuff is done by other races, so I'm not sure how many of them aren't military.
Yeah, I think that is a really valid thing to say, and I mean by the point that Zim hit Earth,
mm-hmm.
I'm not sure they have a research and development division anymore. They have the Vorshans. The Vorshans are incredible scientists. They're the ones who designed the Massive and a bunch of other technology. Any of the seriously neat stuff that the Irkens have, the Megadoomer and stuff, that's all Vorshan technology. That's generally what Irkens are good at. I mean, I guess we see some of them in, food service and things, but it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to assume that that's a punishment. That is where we stick defective Irkens that we don't want to... because they have to gather a tribunal to turn off an Irken's pack. They really They really don't want to do that. They don't want to destroy one of their own.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was saying about them kind of being a race where they all would come to this meeting. It's very interesting to me that they would do that. Because in a general, at least our sort of military structure, you don't gather every soldier together and have them all hear the head general's speeches. It's like, you get the major generals together, and then they tell their lowers, and they tell the people below them, and they tell the people below them. The fact that they're doing this, it's a very interesting idea of how they set up their power structure. So I was wondering why they have a lot of solidarity, and that's why Zim is really, really defective in the fact that he's individualistic. I'd actually say that's what I'd say is really funny about Zim to me. It seems like their race is, while not helpful to everyone, they have a lot of solidarity with each other to a degree. At least it feels that way to me, that they do things for the good of everybody.
That's something I'll keep an eye out for, because I think that they all do it out of fear rather than...
Well, it doesn't matter why they do it. It becomes a societal value.
Like I said, I would like to keep an eye out for that as we're watching this, because when I'm thinking about instances where we see other Irkens, they're all very individualistic. They all work out of a sense of pride. It's just Zim doesn't know when to shut up. The others are more, I would say, opportunistic, and he does not understand how to wait for an opportunity.
That's true. What I was going to say is, I was just trying to think of, I don't know if Scooge is actually in the series or just in the episodes that didn't get made.
We get a couple more episodes with Scooge.
But what I was going to say is, he helps Zim.
Yes.
I'm not saying that he's necessarily the model Irken or anything. Tack, doesn't she come, isn't she just doing that for revenge?
No, actually, that's the whole scene, is her going, this isn't about revenge, this isn't about you, it's just, this is my mission, I want my mission back. And that is actually very fascinating to see that she doesn't want to get in Zim's way. Well, anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Maybe that's another value that they have as a society, then, we can say this, that even though they work for the greater good of the Irken race, they also have pride in their own work because they would like to be promoted. So I think that we've established from the tallest that they do respect somebody in power. So wanting to gain power makes sense.
I think pride would be kind of the biggest factor for Irkens. Pride of themselves and of their race.
Yeah. All right. 2 minutes and 30 seconds in is when they make the first easily accessible joke in this show.
Yeah, they have their dry jokes about conventions.
Like, remember where you parked.
Yeah, cheap use of stuff in the gift shop. Which, they're good jokes, but the Nickelodeon's target audience is not going to understand those jokes, and that's not their fault. That's a life experience that you generally do not get until you're older. And those are from the perspective of an older person attending. If a young person's attending a convention, they're not going to worry about where they parked. And they're probably not going to think of the gift shop stuff as cheap and useless.
But I mean, your first real funny, I think that's easily accessible funny, is even just, everything's lasers with you. Like, what's the deal with Irken Invaders?
But yeah, Purple getting blasted in the eye with the lasers. It's a decent little bit of slapstick, and I mean, it's good. You've got these leaders that have been so pumped up, and
yeah.
And then I think that it's establishing the way Jonan's jokes work for this show. And I mean, any joke is set up, the build of tension, and then the release. But my word, he loves to play it ever so straight. Just a couple of peppering in there, and then boom.
Let me also say that the dismount on that joke's great, because it's like, you get him blasted in the eye, and the whole crowd cheers. Which is really good. Because that's just like, it's funny he gets hit in the eye, and way funnier that every one of the fucking soldiers there gives a fucking cheer as they pan over the crowd.
Those are pretty expensive first few shots, too.
Oh my god, yeah. I was gonna say that the fact is that just the first 2 minutes of this show, this animation must have cost them so much fucking money.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, to say that they don't really even make an easy joke until 2 minutes and 30 seconds in, that they would do something so risky with something so expensive. Like, there's so much money in what they did for that first 2 minutes.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it is obvious looking back at this is not a pilot episode. There's no fucking way you could get the budget for a pilot episode like this. They couldn't get that much money for a pilot. That's just ridiculous.
This is a very, very slow burn established instead of just a, look, there's an alien in a high school. I mean, all you would need to do for pitching this show is more to be like, here's what it's going to be once the show settles in.
Oh yeah, and that's what they did with it.
Yeah. Right away, they bring up their first invader, and they say, it looks like you've grown since last you came before us.
Yeah.
So, not only do they call their most powerful leaders the tallest, they are right away establishing that is something that is actually super important to them. It's not just a title, it's literally their height that is important.
As Dib says later on, your leaders are just taller than everyone else.
And I will posit that perhaps that just means they're older, like trunks of a tree or something. But
No, they're the same age as Zim.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
They were in Zim's class.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Zim grew up with the tallest, and Zim killed the last two tallest. I don't know if those two are twins or something. They are the first time in Irken history where there has been two.
That's very interesting. Didn't know that. That's a show I want to see.
They were like tallest Miyuki and I think tallest Spork. We're entering my creepy zone.
Look, it's not creepy. The people need to know the info.
They also show the callousness of their leaders. They're assigning him to the planet Forge, so they show his inevitable demise. Like, they don't give a
Home of the slaughtering rat people. Why would you draw that? Tears in his eyes. It's so good. Oh, the delivery.
Yeah.
There again, I'm going to say, obviously this is probably more rule of funny than something that I should take as being a racial quality for Irkens, but I was again going to say, the fact that he's surprised by that and hurt by that, I'm again attributing to the fact that I think that he would probably expect them to think highly of him and to treat him with, he's supposed to be advancing their race.
Yeah, Irkens do always seem to be really shocked at the callousness that they receive from each other. I don't know, unless they're in service personnel, they are always shocked at the way that they're being treated.
Yeah, when they get abused. That's what I was saying. I think that these two tallest might be very different from the other ones. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's that
they're bad at their job. They're very bad at their job.
That's true. Were they in charge during Impending Doom 1?
No, I think they might not have been.
And that's probably what's going on here, is they probably, like I said, I think that Irken, trait racially, it would be that they do have pride in themselves and in their superiority over other races and stuff, but I'd say that they probably do trust each other as being Irkens. I mean, think about being on a planet full of like slave races. Another Irkens there, you're like, we have each other's back because they could ambush us any time, and we need to be able to.
They have perfect, unquestioning loyalty to the tallest. If Red and Purple, if they were the tallest during Operation Impending Doom 1, then they were brand new tallest. They were just, boom, tossed straight into it.
I would wager, this is all speculation still, that if they were in charge, they certainly didn't plan it. And judging by how it pans out, they certainly weren't as competent at planning it.
I think Operation Impending Doom 2 is pretty darn well thought out. We will get to later on in the show the one act of rebellion, and you know what I'm talking about. That one act of rebellion is what destroys everything. It takes an already funny joke and doubles back on it to make it so serious it's even more funny when you realize that is the one thing that brings down everything. It's beautiful.
Good point. There is our reveal of our main character at 5 minutes. We did hear his voice before, to be fair.
Well, this is him returning from Food Cordia.
Oh yeah, you're right. It is Food Cordia. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, that's a continuity thing right off the bat. That is, when you're rewatching the series, to know Zim has just escaped Foodcordia, and he is rushed straight to the Convention Hall planet. And something else to remember here, Red and Purple are terrified of him. They really thought they got rid of him. They're so scared to see him again, because they know. And I mean, in the first episode, we know that Zim ruined Operation Impending Doom 1. He ruined a very, very important global operation and destroyed their home planet. They should be scared of him. Back to trial lore, they firsthand witnessed him kill 2 other Tallists.
Wow.
They have so much reason to be terrified of Zim and hate him.
Makes sense, yeah.
I mean,
I'm going to say that due to either having not planned it yet or whatever, right now they just look more surprised and annoyed, not terrified.
They said that voice, it can't be. They are terrified of him.
I'd argue otherwise, but we can agree to disagree because I think you can interpret it either way.
Fair enough. So they go, there's a show of gratitude for your services in the past, here's a sandwich. And he takes the sandwich. They were actually going to put him through a trial as an attempt to kill him. They're like, okay, you're fighting I can't remember the name of it, but some beast thing. And they're like, okay, you fight him, you get out alive, you get to be an invader again.
Oh!
And he would feed them the sandwich. That got cut.
That would have been really good. I understand. You know what? I'm gonna say it was both a sad cut because I think it would have been really, really funny, and well done and well written, but also a good cut because, again, we are moving at a slow pace for a very short show. 5 minutes in, you get to your main, which is intensely long and.
It's not for people with a short attention span, at least not yet. Not until Gur's introduced.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm not even trying to talk about short attention span. I'm saying on the first episode of a show, there is a lot of pressure to hook the viewer within a minute. Yes. Within a minute period of time. It's like the first sentence of a book. You need to grab someone quickly, and to be slow and subtle is a risk. It's an incredible risk to take.
I mean, they're definitely gambling that the visuals and the mystery are gonna hook you.
Yeah, setting. We clearly can see that they were showing off setting more than they were showing off characters or jokes. And to be fair, it's a pretty interesting setting right off the bat, and I'd say that that's cool, but I'd definitely say that's a risk that they took.
Oh yeah. The line marching through my veins like giant radioactive rubber pants. Mm-hmm. It was written as ants, and then he misread it. And John and the others were like, yes. And Nickelodeon's like, no, don't do that. Or maybe it was a typo or something. And Nickelodeon's like, don't do that. That doesn't make any sense. And John's like, yes, do it. Because it's a better line. It's so much better. Giant radioactive rubber ants marching through veins. Yeah, but pants. It's so good.
It's pretty silly.
It's kind of the Strangers with Candy rule.
Yeah.
If a typo works for you, you leave that in.
Oh, and I was gonna say them handing him a sandwich. And him hugging the sandwich. I like that they're establishing a lot of the weirdness of this show pretty well early on here. Not that I think that they could hide it, considering who's writing it and how their tone goes. Like, it seems like that's the inevitable product that would result. But, pretty funny. Alright, our transition to Dib is beautiful. But also, oh my god. First of all, Dib, how do you know they said it's an unknown planet, we dare not speak its name, and then they pointed to a post-it note. Oh, he was listening, not visuals.
Quite honestly, I mean, there's no way to prove it one way or another. All Dib heard was, let's serve them the curly fries. Let's be really honest about it. That's what echoed. That's what we heard as we went down to him. Dib heard a transition that said, let's serve them the curly fries, and he knew aliens were coming.
Oh my god, I'm just imagining now that Dib hears stuff in space all the time, and he always goes, they're coming, and then slides down. Like, it would make so much sense considering his family's reaction to...
The awful thing is, you know he's right, like, 95% of the time. His skills are so finely honed by this point. He hears curly fries, he knows it's gotta be an alien race. And I mean, it's so dumb that no wonder nobody believes him. But he knows. He has no idea who's coming. He just knows there's curly fries involved, and that's gotta be bad.
Flash forward to the next day, dibs at Arby's. He knows!
And it's curly fries.
Oh my god, now I'm just imagining, Tack took over an Arby's instead of the hot dogs and curly fries. That would have been way better.
But yeah, this introduction, wow. They get those characters, boom, boom, boom. You know, we get to see Dib. Dib's introduction is so cool. And he's sliding down, whipping in the wind, he's jumping through the window, and then straight into the sink. Like, okay, Dib's our conspiracy theorist. We are not taking him seriously. These others aren't taking him seriously. His dad is a scientist. We don't really know that much about Membrane except that he's a scientist. He's making toast. And that Gaz is probably going to beat up Dib at some point. But you've got kind of the personalities established. You know, surly sister, conspiracy nut.
Dad who doesn't pay attention to them.
Yes, dad who doesn't pay attention. That's even more important.
That's what you need to establish right away, is that he is as good as an absentee father, really. Yeah. Also, you know, if we're making note of like the first things they say and sort of do, we have the tallest. Like we said, they have the build up for them, and then getting hit in the eye with a laser, which is to say that the two of them argue. I think that's something to establish right off the bat, and they do continue that throughout the scene, so that's not a problem. But then, you know, you have Zim's first moments being like, I need my mission, and, you know, they have the build-up for Zim being, how could he be here? You were banished. And obviously his establishment of having ruined Impending Doom 1. Those are all build-ups for Zim. And then, and I mean, honestly, that builds up Zim to be dangerous really quickly, which I think is funny, you know, considering where we go with him later, but it builds up Zim right away to say that he's destructive, incredibly, and that's a good way to establish him.
Well, what I say...
And tenacious, actually. Tenacious is what you should...
Yes. Yeah, tenacious
take away
is,
from
is
that
definitely the key word with Zim. Mm-hmm. But that definitely shows the type of build that Jonan has. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think he's always building toward the joke, which is the way humor at its basis level works. I sometimes feel like it's Jonan is building something serious and then realizes he can't be sometimes. Going back to Johnny, you've got this whole portion of a comic built up of Johnny wanting to kill himself, and he's so unhappy and everything's bad and he's conflicted. Oh wait, that commercial song. Boom! Comic over. Like, they got diarrhea. Is that a build for one joke at the end? Or is that a guy who's taken everything really seriously, looks around, notices that it is too serious, and then joke? I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Well, maybe it's part of a worldview, too. Speculation, of course, here.
Yeah.
And where you'd have a worldview of... you have all of this serious stuff that comes up and that can bog down a person, can bring them to depression, can make you think bad things, whatever. But to end it on, oh, there's that commercial, is that, you know, life doesn't really work in this clean, all drama or all humor fashion. You know, to say in your worldview that there is a humor in tragedy that is almost inevitable, or, you know, you're always gonna have, like, I'm pretty sure everybody has a story of where they were at a funeral and something really awkward or silly or strange happened.
Yeah.
Where you would have a moment of weirdness amongst what is supposed to be a really serious event. And I'm pretty sure that just happens at every, like, funeral, you know, it just does. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just part of how the worldview kind of is, at least in this universe.
Fair enough.
It's something I just noticed, so I'm going to put it in here. Whenever we look at the tallest, we are going from the ground up. They are always in a shot where we are looking up at them rather than looking straight on at them, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and I'd say I don't know if it's 100% of the time, not even including, like, wide room shots where you have to look down, but it's a lot of the time. It's
I think it's whenever they're talking to one of the Irkens, it's up at them.
And it's a great choice.
It is. It's very well done. It's subtle, but it definitely conveys that looming.
Yes. Alright, this is me reading too much into it quickly for fun, but Irkens didn't even know if there was a planet here, and the Voot Cruiser is identifying Earth as Earth. What if the Vortians know?
Yeah, I like that idea. I think that the Vortians know the solar system better, and maybe the Irkens didn't really steal all of their knowledge.
Well, it's kind of a running theme, is that, the Irkens, they're leeches, they're conquerors. They don't have all of the attributes of the races that they've conquered.
You know what? Interruption. You know how they burned the Library of Alexandria? I imagine that's how Irkens would behave.
Yeah.
It's just they did take tech, obviously, but I can imagine them finding vast libraries of knowledge and not treating them that gently. Like when they're taking over a place, I'd imagine they're like, take out the infrastructure, and then they'd be like, oh, we lost all of their fucking knowledge.
Well, I mean, the way that they work is they send in one invader who gets to know everything and is expected to take down a planet on their own. And then they fucking raise the place. They shoot a beam at it and destroy all life. I'm guessing that they only enslave a race when they think they'll be super duper useful.
Yeah, they probably just kill them if not.
Zim has no plans to enslave the humans. He says that every once in a while, but whenever, like, he says that as, like, pump-up speech, like, but usually, and whenever he's actually discussing a plan, he's gonna kill them all. Humans do not seem to be a useful species.
Zim chooses his disguise. Obviously, there's the nod to Jonan and...
No, that's Steve Russell, I believe.
Okay. Either way, and then he picks a costume that looks exactly like himself with hair and different eyes. And I think that's pretty funny because that's vain Zim at his best right away, just to be like, these guys are ugly. He's never even fucking seen humans before.
That's true.
He doesn't know what a good-looking human is. He doesn't know what a bad-looking human is. He doesn't even know what a normal-looking human is.
He just knows what a Zim looks like, and Zim is amazing.
He sees it and he's like, this is good. Okay, so obviously really cool tech to show off right away, just to show they have clothes-changing technology, a house-building technology that goes from a drawing. It establishes itself really well, and he even gets these robot parents to make him look normal without even really having too much setup on that stuff. You get the great joke of the sound, quiet, do you want to wake up the whole planet, and then obviously a massive amount of noise that it makes doing this process. So you see Zim being pretty stupid, but in the same turn, you almost, at first his reaction to it is that he's embarrassed. It seems like he's embarrassed, and he goes inside dragging Gur, and then closes the door and went, well, that went smoothly. Like
all of that immediately in the vault. Just in the vault. Zim is on the cusp of going, I fucked up. No. Zim does not make mistakes.
Yeah, like he immediately he's proud of what he has just done. Which was very clearly wrong.
Irkens are scared of germs. Irkens are germaphobes. And that, we get that in the germs episode as kind of a nod. But that's also, according to Jonan on the audio commentary, if he is ever to be believed, that seems like a fine enough place.
It's up in the air.
When he says it, this seems like one of those places where he's more serious.
Yeah.
It's not the water that burns them. It's the fact that Earth water is impure. That it's not pure H2O. It's the impurities in the water that burn him, which is actually why sometimes some water will burn him and some won't.
That's a fun idea. Also, I would say I think it's really funny. What I was saying before we cut was I like that immediately he says this ball of filthy dirt. He does not say filthy humans. He says filthy dirt. And we have seen them on other planets so far, but all of them have been covered in pretty much metal. Just metal and pavement and...
That's something to keep an eye out for when we're looking in places that...
They're completely urban. It seems like everywhere they go, it makes them completely urbanized.
Well, everywhere on Earth, I mean, this is something that people pick up on fast with Invader Zim. There's always grime stains everywhere. But let's keep an eye out for Irken conquered machinery and stuff. Usually that stuff doesn't have grime stains.
It's spotless. I mean, we do see it, like, think about the opening scene in that giant convention hall. Their tech was all just, in terms of the show terms, like sparkling and clean and sterile. Everything feels really sterile.
The presence or absence of filth is something to watch out for while we're watching these. Though it becomes way more ambiguous later on, which I like. Dib is clearly set up as the antagonist in this first episode, which I think is a lot easier of a pill to swallow, because ambiguity is generally not what networks like to introduce into a children's show. I had a lot of people who are my friends who asked about Invader Zim, and they said, okay, who's the bad guy? You know, to which it's like, it depends on who you're rooting for.
I'd say that this is a very clear use of the concept of protagonist and antagonist instead of good guy and bad guy.
Yeah.
It's the dichotomy set up between them isn't meant to be necessarily good and evil. We, as humans, obviously have the view that we wouldn't want Irkens to be the ones that win, but to be fair, the sort of thing that they're doing isn't something that's unfamiliar to the human race.
And also, just personality-wise, in the first episode, you want to root for Zim because Zim's going to have interesting stuff happening, and as a viewer, you want interesting stuff happening. And he's got a bit of a lovable, doofy thing going on, you know? He's kind of fun, he's very cute, you know, he hug a sandwich.
Yeah.
He's a little green man, you know? What's wrong with that? Let's see this guy succeed. And Dib's introduced as a bully.
The other kids clearly are painting him as one.
Well, you could say that they're more painting him as the unpopular kid, but I think anybody who kind of takes a step back and doesn't mind looking a little bit closer, you know, after seeing a few episodes, Dib probably bullied the hell out of these children. And I mean, he's young. He's like a 4th or 5th grader. He's gonna do dumb shit. He's just a kid. But he's probably bullied a lot of them in his search for answers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, even though we know that Dib is the unpopular kid that gets bullied, I also think that he's probably pushed a lot of the kids in ways that they probably didn't like. Mm-hmm. He's not shy. And that's the thing there, is he's by now not interested in his peers' approval necessarily or anything like that. And I think that really, in his quest to find the paranormal things, he's probably been like, you saw something? Is your dad a vampire? You know, just the weirdest shit. He's probably interrogated every single one of these kids. I mean, like, even the offhanded joke of old kid, he's probably like, let me study your genes. I need to get you down here so I can find out what this phenomenon is. Like, he probably has just hurt everybody in his class through his, and we're also setting up Dib as, just as tenacious as Zim.
Yes.
Right away.
Very true.
I mean, we also have Dib's introductions in terms of his class. We just said, like, he's clearly painted as being unpopular. Mm-hmm. Already, everybody in class doesn't like him, isn't in the mood for his bullshit, so he clearly brings this stuff up all the time.
Yes.
And, yeah, so that's all things that we should note.
Yeah. And about the tenacious, you're absolutely right. In a couple minutes, he's going to have a line where he says, you can't hide in there forever. If you can, I'll wait in here forever. And then the cuffs get blasted out of his hands, and he goes, but from the ends of the earth to the depths of the ocean, and then line fades out. But, I mean, that's pretty textbook tenacious.
Yeah. Also, just a quick note for a minor-ish character, but one that I think is fun and important in terms of the show. Bitters' introduction is pretty fun, and within, I think about 5 seconds of her being on screen, she makes an unnatural human movement, which we haven't seen any other human do yet. We've seen some of the Irkens do some slightly exaggerated moves, but I think that she's the only one that we've seen move really unnaturally.
Oh yeah, that turn and the sound effect, like the rattling, rain stick bug thing, she is unnatural. And I mean, you could just chalk that up to animation movement, but in one of the cut episodes later on, she is sitting there with a hood on, saying that she can't be out in the daylight. She's probably not a vampire. She's something bad, though.
Can we just say that I think it's hilarious that Dib isn't pointing to her as being supernatural when she's obviously supernatural, whereas all the other kids in class aren't?
Over the course of the show, Dib learns when to pick his fights.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe he's just scared of her.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking. Like, Dib probably one time said, "What's up with Ms. Bitters?" Then he got a Bitters punishment, and never again. I think it's a testament to his tenaciousness that he continues to speak out in Bitters' class.
Mm-hmm.
She lets him get away with it because she doesn't seem to care that much.
She doesn't really give any fucks about anything.
But, I mean, later on we'll see. They've got methods for dealing with Dib. They just decide how much Dib bullshit they're willing to put up with in a given day.
I think that the school has a Dib procedure.
Oh my god. It's just funny. We know that NASA Place does.
Yeah, well, I mean, you see, the thing about them having a Dib procedure, see, I'm imagining not only is Dib an incredibly difficult child, he also, his father probably never comes in. They can't call him and be like, your son's misbehaving, or...
You're right!
They can't get his dad to punish him in any capacity. He's completely untenable. They have to have procedure for him because there's no one at home keeping him in check either. So the only place he's going to get checked in terms of that sort of thing is school, and they'd have to have a way to deal with him because they'd literally never be able to run their school without having a Dib procedure.
And this is probably how Dib gets to talk out, just to burst out in class so much, is just... They can't keep him quiet,
They have nothing.
They've obviously sent him to the crazy house. They do it a couple times a month. It doesn't stop him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just laughing at the idea that for Dib, the threat of, I'm gonna call your dad, you'd be like, yes, call him, tell him, please get him to come. Yeah. Please get him to do anything. Alexis and I, first of all, noting that this chase scene, along with the fucking opening of this show, makes this probably the most expensive cartoon pilot I can even think of in my whole life.
There's CG during the house building sequence too.
Oh, there was tons of CG in the opening too.
Oh yeah, I'm adding another.
Yeah,
I mean, another scene that does.
I'm just saying, like, holy shit. I mean, can you imagine the Rugrats people being like, hey, our first episode, we want to have an enormous chase scene. By the way, lots of backgrounds, lots and lots of CG in
2000 through 2002, I believe.
All right. Even so, yeah, CG was way more expensive.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god, I can't even imagine. Like, I can't imagine them pitching this. Like,
and right off the bat, let's put this to rest because this is the biggest question anybody ever asks regarding Invader Zim. Why was it canceled? It was too expensive. It's not creative differences. It's not ratings and stuff. There's bits and pieces of that everywhere. But you want, if you want to take the route with one simple answer, even though nothing's ever like that, it was too expensive. You watch this show, it's good. They weren't denying that. This show was literally too good for them to keep making.
And what I would say is it's probably a mixture of expenses versus creative.
Yeah. I'm just trying to kind of lay that down and make it nice and easy. That's what Jonin, that's what True Heart, that's what they will say at conventions and stuff. When you get them down to brass tacks, that is why. And you take a look at these episodes. You might notice a few bad frames or a little off model.
I mean, early.
But look at the amount of work, so many backgrounds, gorgeous shots.
Lots of angles too.
Lots of angles.
The thing is, if you're not that familiar with animation and what is more expensive and what's less expensive, think about it the thing as a camera. Think about the screen as a camera, and think about whenever they have to cut it to another angle. They're not just filming it from two different angles. They have to literally draw both of those angles. Mm-hmm. So a cheaper show, say first season Digimon, if you give that a look. And I'm not trying to throw shade on the show. I mean, it's fun and whatever. But yeah, first season Digimon, look at how many shots they will stay on one angle, one shot, and hardly move their background characters at all, and even their main characters. So they'll sometimes just be above them so they don't have to do lip flaps. You know, like, just those sorts of things are ways to keep their budget cheap and still have the show telling a visual story, but obviously cutting corners when they have to cut corners. That's fine, you know, I understand that.
Yeah, and that's part of any show, is that they understand when they can spend a lot of their budget and when they have to cut a corner. That's where clip shows and stuff come from. You want the super special gorgeous episode, you might have to take a clip show later on so that you don't have to do so much. Or a bottle episode, which is an episode of a TV show that takes place in one room or one location, or with like only a couple members of the cast. Those are written so that they can have a cheap episode. Watch Invader Zim.
They're not cutting corners in this episode.
Even Room with a Moose that basically takes place on a bus. There's so much CG. This show was good all the time. There's no really bad, egregiously terrible episodes visually, because they never cut their budget. As far as I can tell, you know?
I'm sure they did in certain places, but they certainly didn't pull too many punches.
Yes.
All right, I was going to say, during this chase scene, they have the ice cream truck saying your existence is meaningless without ice cream. And, you know, they're having this great epic chase scene, and they're also layering it with a joke, which I think is great, because you're not actually really breaking the tension of the chase so much as just making it all so funny at the same time.
Yeah, and good world builder, too. Just the desolation of ice cream.
It's existential ice cream.
Also, can't get through this episode with pointing out Dib, just horrifying line of, they might even name your autopsy video after me. Who the hell says that?
Dib.
That's a very antagonistic line. That's so violent and dark. And why? There's no reason for that. That's the fame, that's the acknowledgement that he wants, and just I can't believe I didn't really think about it like this, but the willful desire to conquer that Dib has.
I think it's actually great, because taken out of context, it's a great villainy sort of line, you know? I mean, we know in advance that this is somebody who's trying to conquer the planet, and yet you're on his side because his enemy, Dib, is chasing him, trying to capture him, and telling him that he's gonna destroy him and kill him and expose him.
Like, this is a bit of Dib's true colors there. Like, Dib in the room is like, he's here to conquer Earth. He's one of the monsters I've been talking about. Like, all of that, we know protagonists like that. You can totally identify with what Dib is saying there. He's right. We gotta save Earth. But in the heat of battle, Dib wants to see Zim cut open, and he wants them to call it the Dib tape. That's so fucking dark. That's...
I gotta say, there's also the aspect. I totally see where you're coming from in the idea of being like, oh, hey, he would say in front of the kids that what he's trying to do is expose this monster to try and protect him or have proof of his assertions. But I'd also argue that after finding people unresponsive to his pleas, he gets more and more in need of that violence and that exposing, you know. And I mean, it actually is a continuation of the thought to be like, here's me getting to prove that what I said is true, and to say like, oh, and maybe they'll even name your autopsy video after me, which will mean forever the first proof of aliens will be named Dib.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. That is probably not where Dib started. There is a character arc with Dib that I will discuss at great length. I'm not going to talk about it now. We will talk about it in bits and pieces as the series continues, because Dib's like top 5 favorite characters. But it's good to remember that for all of these characters, we are not seeing them at the start of their character arcs. We will see their pasts. You and I will probably watch a reading of the trial.
Yeah.
But we will see Dib's past and debatably his future.
Mm-hmm.
Dib had a lot that's happened to get him to here. Nobody on this show is whole. And for most of them, about 75% of their breakage happened prior to meeting them.
The show is pretty bleak, and I think that's obvious just even from the fact that we're having a discussion about how villainous our what should be a protagonist that has such villainy, and we've also discussed Zim being vain. This is, I wouldn't even necessarily call it vain so much as in desperate need of acceptance and approval.
Yeah, and that's another very important similarity between both of them. Both of them want acceptance from their people so very badly, and I don't want to get too much into the fan culture surrounding it, but there's an awful lot of fan fiction out there of Dib just going, nope, give up, siding with the Irkens, which doesn't fit. We don't really have to talk about all of that, and that's really just so people can have their Zeta. But it's very, very telling that so many people can interpret it that way and can look at it and go, why are you still trying, either of you? These people hate you. But
I'd say it'd be actually much more fun to see it end in a sort of, they build up both sides so high to the point where Zim has destroyed all of his own people and Dib has destroyed all of his own people, and that they're the only people left in the universe, and now they're just trying to kill each other. That would be a really, really apt ending to the sort of just escalation of isolating themselves from the people they're trying to get their approval of, so much so that they eventually lead to their destruction.
You know, that would have been a really awesome parallel, like, later on in the series, Dib was going to travel out to the stars, and we were going to get to see him as the fish out of water, which, my God, it's so hard to be a Christian when things like this exist.
God, why did you forsake me and take away my Dib episodes?
Clearly that's the most important thing in life. But that would have been really cool if what happened for that wasn't just Zim leaving Earth, but like a huge fight. And more than Zim's destruction, Dib levels the human race.
See, I'm saying picturing Zim here on the right side and Dib on the left side, and Dib fires a shot at Zim knowing that the Earth is right behind him and being like, he's willing to take that risk, and he's the one who destroys Earth in his attempt to kill Zim. And behind Dib is the Irken Armada, and Zim fires at Dib, destroys the Irken Armada, and they've both destroyed their own people in the attempt to kill each other. And that's the end of the show. It's just the two of them as the only ones left, just flying through empty space trying to kill each other.
That would be a pretty good end of the series, gotta say.
That's it, canon. You heard it here, folks. That's the end of Invader Zim.
Alright, let's just try to get to the end of the first episode. We kind of agreed there in that last scene. Tallest are definitely afraid of Zim. And it ends with the film ripping apart. I mean, that's a very horror movie thing, and that's the mixture of science fiction film conventions and horror film conventions are very important when watching Invader Zim.
Yeah, I almost wish I knew more horror oeuvre and B-movie stuff, just because I think that I'd have a better grasp on what they're referencing when they reference.
As a little, middle school kid watching Zim when it first came out, there's a lot of horror references that you don't get. You're gonna watch through this time, and the X-Files references alone. This show felt super fresh as a little kid who hadn't seen that stuff. But
It's very referential.
It's very referential.
Actually, I was going to say, something that this show has always reminded me of, and while I'm not 100% sure it gains any inspiration from it, because I'm not sure about the timing on when this came out versus when my other reference comes out, but this one always reminded me of DBZ in terms of the Saiyan race, the Irken race being conquerors as it is. That's always reminded me of Saiyans.
It is almost probably taken, or it's almost definitely taken from that.
I mean, I know that a lot of these guys are anime inspired, and I do not doubt that at all, but I'm just not 100% sure on the timing, and I'm not gonna... The Japanese stuff will have already been out before the show, but I'm not sure how much the English has come out, and I'm not sure if they would have been watching the Japanese.
They were fans of Evangelion.
Okay, yeah,
so
that's a good...
I'm going to assume that they were also familiar with DBZ, and that if not, I'm not saying that like they went, oh, let's do something like the Saiyan race, but I'm guessing it was in the back of their heads.
Yeah, I mean, even if you take something slightly, you know, obviously this idea is taken in a much different and I think more interesting direction, because the thing about the Saiyan race is kind of just, they're having their race as conquerors, but the Saiyans are working for someone else as conquerors, which I think is not as good as a race that is entirely sort of just colonizing every planet, taking everything, appropriating everything.
Yeah, that is where those are the two main strengths for the Irkens, is military and appropriations. And whatever else they have, they at least in the past have had a very good eye for what to not destroy.
I mean, in the end, really what the inspiration of all of this is British, American, and Roman even, just in terms of conquering and taking. Ooh. Though I'd say Romans are a little bit better about it than Brits, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, that's the fun thing about sci-fi. Science fiction is always about the human condition because we don't actually know other races. So the races that are depicted in science fiction, they're always going to be a reflection of cultures that we have had.
Yeah. Closing thoughts about this episode?
Closing thoughts about the episode? It sets things up well. And looking back on it as somebody who's seen the whole series a lot of times, it's not a good episode because the show gets so much better. And that's something you're going to hear from every Zim fan is the show got canceled as it was hitting its stride, as everything came together, and as it got really, really good. But as far as first episodes go, it lays out not only the groundwork, but it starts to set the tone of the show. The tone of the show will refine and darken, but it has the lines, giant radioactive rubber pants, the pants command me. It has Gur singing the Doom song, and it has Dib screaming, they might even name your autopsy video after me. You cannot say that the other episodes are ever so much darker than this one, or that this one does not at least set the tone for the babies and the germs and the organ stealing. Because the show has set its tone, it's not going to pull its punches, it's going to get dark right away, and...
Oh, I was going to say, I think that the success of a first episode of a show comes from how well they establish their characters and their setting, how much they can convey to us in, I'm pretty sure that was 22 minutes, how much they can tell us about the show at large in 22 minutes, I think sets their bar of if it was a successful first episode or not. And I feel like they were able to convey a lot without being too expositional, which I am completely good with. You know, when you can establish characterization, I'm going to have to say that the exposition on the classroom was pretty obvious of them being like, you're crazy, you're always saying stuff like that, dude. Yeah. That stuff is pretty textbook expositional dialogue, but, you know, a lot of other stuff wasn't. You know, having Zim run up and say, I'm here for my mission, and them saying, weren't you banished? And he's like, oh, I quit that. You quit being banished? Like, those things are not textbook exposition dialogue. Those are actually playing within the universe, not really pandering to the lowest common denominator in terms of what they're explaining. I can say very surely that a lot of characters got an introduction that was not super textbook exposition.
And they spend a lot of time setting things up, but not really. Other than, like, the general premise, they don't develop any leads in their first episode.
Yeah, they don't really have a payoff necessarily. Oh, wait, I actually would say the payoff is him showing himself to the tallest again. Their setup is, we sent you on a bogus mission. Their payoff is, I got to this planet, and you are surprised to see me still alive.
Well, if I were watching this for the first time, and I got to the end of this first episode, I would know generally, like, okay, so from here, we're going to see Pinky and the Brain style attempting to take over the world. Maybe some him trying to fit in.
Yeah.
Like, that is what I would think of at the end of...
Anticipating, yeah.
And I would be so wrong.
You would be very wrong.
I would have no idea what I was in for. Like, it sets up the tone of the show, but there is no way to guess what you're going to say next.